Few drivers in Formula One have been so polarizing as one Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc, since entering the sport in 2018, has been regarded as one of the most talented drivers on the grid. People cite his amazing one-lap pace, his race consistency, his driving standards. I mean, people fawn over this guy. And considering his team Ferrari, well, how successful is he? Oh man, this is exactly why Charles is so polarizing, because it's exactly that, his lack of success in the sport. Of course, we have had polarizing drivers like Lance Stroll, the Mazepin, who are polarizing because of their personalities and the type of person they are, that being a dickhead. However, I say few drivers have been as polarizing as Charles, in the sense of people love to debate this guy's game every single day seemingly. There are so many discussions on Charles, specifically in regards to his driving and skill in general. Yeah, one side of people say he is good, like really good. Max Verstappen levels are good, and all that is stopping him from being dominant in the sport is a good car that can win the title. However, you have another side of people who say that he is overrated and not as good as people make him out to be. And the most amazing part of this whole debate is that both sides have insurmountable evidence to support their argument. That's why I believe that even if Charles is to ever win a title, these debates won't stop, and he will always be remembered as a what could have been driver, regardless of success or not. But we are not discussing today of what I believe in. Instead, I want to simply discuss a topic that fascinates me, because if I do give my input and my stance on what I think of Charles, then I'll be called biased because I literally am. Hello, the Ferrari hat. So instead, I want to observe. Not everything needs a reaction. I simply want to go through the career of Charles Leclerc and observe just what the hell is wrong, because despite of what I just said with my opinions and all, here is something undeniable. Charles Leclerc is a wickedly talented driver who deserves success. Even outside of his upbringing and the mental challenges he has faced, he is simply talented in the sea of a Formula One car. So why? Why hasn't he been shown the same success that Max Verstappen and now Lando Norris have been shown? To answer this, I have taken a sample of a few races from every year in his career, minus 2018 since he wasn't at Ferrari yet, and let us see if this man is truly unlucky or if he's just not as good as many say he is. Go join the Discord to talk about nefarious things, and subscribe if you're new if you love to eat crayons. So enough yapping, and let's get to quacking.
A good weather for a race, but especially for a dog.
2019, the beginning of the end. Okay, maybe that's a bit dramatic, but as we know, 2019 would be the first year of Charles in red. Not to say this kid was under pressure is a bit of an understatement. His rookie year in 2018 was great, don't get me wrong, but getting promoted to Ferrari after it, now that's bold, especially because Ferrari are not really known to hire young guns to be successful for the team. They usually pick out experienced drivers to be successful, and even more typically, pick former world champions to bring glory to Maranello. So if Charles is that good that it forced Ferrari to break that tradition, then what the hell does he have in store for us? Well, not even 3 races in, we have our first event to talk about, that being the Bahrain Grand Prix. After a pretty good debut race of a P5 qualifying race result, Charles pulls up to the next round in Bahrain and slaps his car in pole position, ready to fight for his first win in his second ever race in red. And you know, he was doing it. He was leading by a comfortable margin that not even Lewis Hamilton, the W10, was able to do much. However, we are talking about this race, and that's because on lap 46, 11 laps from the end, Charles, who had an 8-second gap, reported an issue with the engine, and not even 5 seconds later, unfortunately, he knew he was doomed. His engine cylinder thingy-mabob, I don't know, I'm not an engineer, failed, which essentially is like ripping RAM off of your PC while it's turned on, and this failure caused him to get overtaken a couple laps later and barely hang on for third in the race. This one I feel is pretty clear-cut. I mean, he was leading comfortably and should have cruised home to first, but bullshit got in the way. It's pretty unlucky. But moving on from that, the next race I want to mention is Monaco, which I'll tell you now, this may be mentioned every single year. Anyways, Monaco 2019 is notable since both qualifying and race were their own disasters. In the qualifying, Charles, welcomed and cheered hard by his home race fans, set a lap fast enough for 7th, and when it came time for the final runs, Ferrari said, yeah, we're good, Charles is good enough to stay in. By the way, this is Q1. Still want to know what happens. He goes down to 8th, and then 12th, and then 15th, and in a cruel bit of irony, his teammate Sebastian Vettel, who was 17th, goes fastest on his final run, meaning Charles is out in 16th for his home race. And I'll tell you, the comeback could be legendary on home soil, but two things: we're in Monaco, so no soil, and we're in Monaco, so no overtaking. Despite that, in the race, Charles is on a tear and overtakes driver after driver, and it's looking good until Yeah, it really be like that sometimes. So on one hand, I don't blame Charles for driving super aggressive and risking a crash, but at the same time, you gotta use your brain sometimes. That far back at Rascat should be illegal, but alas, it's too late to apologize. As for this event, I'm going to say this is 50-50, since in the qualifying, you had the team thinking backwards, and in the race, you had Charles thinking backwards. Finally, I'm gonna highlight many races in quick succession since I'm not looking to waste all your guys' time. In Germany 2019, Charles had pace to win that race and was looking good until he wasn't. He crashed right when the rain started to pour down again, and yeah, conditions are tricky, but drivers have instincts on this sort of stuff. They know when it's time to come in, and Charles overestimated his chances, unfortunately. In Singapore, Charles again had pace to win that race. He even started on pole, but was being hounded by both Lewis and Seb all race long. Ferrari then called in Seb to pit and left Charles out for longer, which resulted in Seb getting the overcut and ultimately winning that race. I'm going to say this is on Ferrari and not on Charles since he was the lead driver. Protocol is to pit the first driver in the lead, and Ferrari and all their data of the race knew Charles could get under threat from this. Seb drove a great race, but if typical strategy was upheld, Charles likely would have won. Finally, Russia was kinda similar, except Seb was able to overtake Charles on turn 1 lap 1 and was setting lap times to win that race. Charles was staying close in second, and after Seb retired with an engine issue, Charles should have inherited the lead, but Mercedes. Luck was working overtime for Merc, which led to a Mercedes 1-2, courtesy of a VSC, and Charles finished only in third. Yeah, that ain't on Charles again, but that's it for 2019. What a year, huh? Moving on to 2020, and this year will be shorter since, you know, the little thing in the air. Anyways, the first race I want to highlight is Hungary 2020, where it was one of those where the broadcasters rage bait you by saying, rain in 10 minutes, guys, trust me, just 10 more minutes and we promise things will get better. Leclerc initially was looking well in the top 6, but he would finish the race in 11th. Why, you may ask? I don't know. I kid you not. I spent 1 hour and 40 minutes rewatching this boring ass race, and my conclusion for why Leclerc dropped out so much is that I just don't know. He did pit early for softs, and maybe that's the reason since he reported no grip, but I don't know. It seems too simple. Next event though is our last fully detailed one, and it's Spain. More like without the yes, right? Anyways, Charles got fucked over in an almost comical way. Charles was doing everything he can the SF1000, meaning he was giving his all for P10, and while he is trying to score some points for the team, he spins, which is enough to take him out of the race. Huh? This may look bad for Charles, but in all places to experience a power cut, it's through the Mickey Mouse chicane at the Old Spain layout, and he does his mid-turn-in, which causes the car to suddenly spin around. And to make matters even worse, his fucking seatbelt unbuckles and only notices once he's driving back straight, and if he doesn't pit to fix it, he will be disqualified. So when he pits, he just decides, fuck this, and rage quits from the race. Charles, my brother, I do not blame you. Finally, here are some rapid fire moments from 2020. In Monza, he crashes the fuck out, and yeah, it's kind of his fault, no two ways about it. And in Turkey, he is looking to score a second place again, and on the final lap, sends a move on Checo, but in the super slippy conditions, he goes deeper than I do in your mom, which not only loses him second, but also third. Sorry, buddy, I know conditions were tricky, but the team didn't hit the go deep button. That's all you, man. And that's it for 2020. What a year, huh? Moving into 2021, and boy oh boy are things getting strange. Starting with Monaco, and in qualifying, Charles looked fast enough for pole position, but hold your horses. Charles sent it into the wall in the final runs, which did stop faster drivers like notably Max from getting pole off of him. Look, who cares about potential conspiracy there, especially because the real bad luck comes from the fact that on his way to the grid for the race, his car smells funny and feels funny, and lo and behold, the gearbox is gone. Brother retired on lap -1. Like, that is a different kind of misery there, so this is not on him. Don't be silly now. Moving on to Britain though, and race war people. Charles would watch that terrorism happen and inherit the lead of the race. Lewis Hamilton will also get captured by the ICC and be given a 10-second time penalty, so Charles could breathe relatively easy now in the lead. And he was looking set to win the race, and despite Lewis clawing his way back, Charles had the pace delta to win. But then, of course, he goes over the radio and says, why is the engine cutting out? That's right, under high speeds, his engine genuinely had a 50-50 chance to cut out for a second or two, and that is so many tenths and seconds lost there. So much so then, the dying laps of the race, Charles would get overtaken by Lewis and lose the win. Again, there was just not much Charles could have done there, and you really got a feel for him. Had those tiny engine cuts not happened, he could have won the race, but alas, it's a classic Ferrari moment. And to make sure Charles keeps dying on the inside, the next race in Hungary would see him immediately killed by Stroll at turn 1, and I'm sorry, you cannot convince me that wasn't an assassination attempt. We were all clowning Bottas for missing his breaking point, but what about this syrup-licking buffoon? So to wrap up this abysmal year, I want to discuss Turkey, because this is perhaps the most infamous moment from Charles' season. He was doing great on strategy in the wet race and found himself in a position where if he puts it right, he could maybe sneak a podium, but the only problem was he was on super old inters while his competition had new ones. So ideally, he should have pit and have even newer inters, but it's best to know all possibilities, right? So Charles asked a simple question: if we stay out on this set, what position would we finish in, and how does his team respond? If we could stay ahead of Bottas, the current race leader, we will be P1. Oh, you don't fucking say. Not only do they not answer his question, but he doesn't know what to do now, so he stays out and of course loses the win, but also the podium. It's easy to look on hindsight and be like, Charles should have pitted and taken initiative, but in reality, he doesn't know what's going on and could have maybe won, so this is again on the team, I have to say. Still can't believe this one. So that was 2021. What a fucking year, huh? But now it's time for 2022. This year would see Ferrari debut a really competitive car, so much so that maybe the title can be won. It is Charles's time, baby. So what happens? Don't get me started. Imola 2022, he feels the aura of my boy Checo and spins at the final chicane, which loses him the podium to Lando Norris. In Spain, he's leading quite comfortably while the fall of the Roman Empire is happening behind him. Unfortunately for him though, he was driving the Trojan horse. It's not even the same time period, what am I saying? Since his car would blow up and see him out of the race. Monaco would see Charles on pole and leading that race in the wet and literally have the win on a silver platter, but the team decided to make things harder on themselves. They pit both drivers off a full wets for enters, and okay, it is drying up, but it's drying up quickly, which prompts some to stay out and just wait to go on dries. And the dry period comes way faster than intended, so the team concoct the genius idea of double stacking both drivers who are like 2 seconds apart from each other, and Charles, who was behind Sainz, saw him massively held up, his chances for victory gone in a flash, and him broken up with. God damn. Baku, keep in mind this is the 3rd race in a row now, sees Charles looking fast, but engine blows up and that's it. Silverstone sees Charles looking fast, but Checo ramps his big hairy cock in Charles' twinkle, but miraculously doesn't hurt him as much. And in fact, he looks really fast and could maybe still win. However, when a safety car comes out, Ferrari say, let's keep track position. Yeah, everybody pit behind him and it doesn't matter what happens. Charles is screwed. And after criticizing his team on this, what does Binotto the bastard do? He fingers Charles like he's the one to blame. Oh brother. Yeah, one could say Sainz took initiative, he disobeyed orders and made his own strategy to win. But if Binotto is mad Charles didn't do that, what does that say about the team? It's your fucking team. You are in charge of making sure the strategies are good and not abysmal dog shit. Fuck you, Binotto, you ruined my fucking life. France sees Charles looking fast, and when it's time to pit, Ferrari is like, nah, stay out, but make sure you keep setting purple laps. So in other words, kill yourself, and boy does Charles try to. Hungary sees him looking fast again, and in an effort to outsmart the competition, Ferrari puts Charles on the hard tires, which in the context of the weekend was like voluntarily giving yourself the bubonic plague today and denying the medicine. Singapore sees Charles qualifying on pole, but immediately got overtaken by the Czech dog again. That's my boy. Japan sees Charles fighting, trying to keep the title alive by any means necessary, and when Checo again, lots of Checo, comes to overtake him, Charles goes deep, which means he keeps the place, but gets penalized and loses the place and title anyways. And Brazil sees Ferrari put Charles on inters in a dry track and him get crashed out by Lando, and I'm just so done. In a 22 race season, 10 races, or nearly half of them, saw Charles get fucked over in an unbelievable way. Yes, some could be traced back to him, but the vast majority were not of his doing, purely the team's. So 2022. I am tired. I am very drained by now, so I'm just going to quickly cover out 2023, 24, and 25 wins since they're all pretty similar anyways. In the first race of 2023, Charles immediately has an engine failure, gets crashed out in Australia, and gets hit with so many terrible strategy calls and car issues that hinder his race, and it's just so bleak, man. So much so that in Brazil 2023, on his way to the grid after qualifying in second, his hydraulics fail and sees him out on lap 0, and he says to himself, why am I so unlucky? I wish I knew, Charles. I wish I knew. 2024, thankfully, will be so much better. He didn't have that much bad luck apart from Canada, which saw whatever this was, Austria, where he got lap 1 damage, and Baku, where he lost to an illegal car. However, he did make quite a few mistakes, like in Great Britain, where he was just terrible, and in Hungary, where he was a bit slow and spinny, but his highs were very high, which resulted in him nearly getting second from the standings from Lando, and Ferrari almost won the Constructors. Surely, off of this momentum, Ferrari can build a good car for 2025 and see Charles once again fight for the title, right? Now, I'm assuming we have all seen the season, and if you know, you know. However, for those who didn't, if I was able to recap 2022 but I'm unable to for 2025, then I think that shows how terrible it was. Essentially, he was driving a car that was forced to be driven in a way that was not what anyone imagined, thanks to the plank under the car, and I just want to forget it all. Hungary, man, what could have been? So, 2023, 24, and 25. What years, huh? All right, after looking at all of these seasons, let's ask ourselves once more, is Charles Leclerc overrated or unlucky? Well, like I said in the intro, both sides have mountains of evidence to use on each other, so by a technicality, he is both. He is both not as good as many people say he is, that being a Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton level driver, specifically because he lacks the initiative and pressure capabilities of the aforementioned drivers, but he is also so astronomically unlucky that to anyone who doesn't view these races, they would think he's just shit. However, I want to give my verdict. I think Charles is just unlucky and is only called overrated because F1 fans don't know how to watch the sport. Let me explain. Not every driver that enters the sport has to be generational. Yes, Charles is fast and could very well contend with Max for a title, but there is a difference between being good enough to fight generational drivers and being generational yourself. Lewis Hamilton v Vettel is a perfect example of a generational driver fighting against a great driver who can contend with generational talent, and those were amazing battles between two amazing drivers. However, it is incomparable to Max versus Lewis, which was two generational drivers fighting against each other, an extreme rarity. What I'm trying to say is, Charles is not generational, and just because he isn't, doesn't mean he is overrated. He is comparable to Max, but he's not better than Max, which should absolutely not invalidate his talent or empower people to say he is on that level. I long for a day where we could stop comparing everything and just appreciate great things for being great. A lot of things outside of F1 can apply to this, and we should all remember that just because an 8 or 9 out of 10 isn't a 10 out of 10 doesn't make it overrated, trash, garbage, or even mid. Learn to appreciate. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Charles Leclerc. Charles, if you want what's right for you, leave Ferrari. The team doesn't deserve you, and my only regret is that I am not a fan of you over the team, because once you're gone, unfortunately, I'm staying at the team. But one day, glory will come back to Maranello, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you, Charles. Watch this jinx though. Anyways, I want to give a quick shout out to all members of the flock for their continued support. Make sure to join if you want cool benefits as well as just helping me out. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, so it really helps me out. Make sure to let me know in the comments what you think of this. And as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for the duck.